The beginning of the organized state awakened an organized species, one concerned with protecting itself from an ancient primordial chaos, appeasing the gods that gave it the resources necessary for life, and guiding the souls of the just to the afterlife. Today we explore the myths and gods of the oldest state known to man, ancient Egypt. This in an attempt to see how their myth shaped our own myths and our own thoughts in the West. Welcome all. In keeping with our exploration of the oldest myths known to man, today we review Egyptian mythology, a guide to the gods, goddesses, and traditions of ancient Egypt by Geraldine Harris. To those who are new, welcome. I'm your host, Heraclitus of Ephesus, and here we explore the major works of the Western philosophical and literary canon. In past reviews, we examine the mythologies of the Greeks and the Sumerians. This for the purpose of seeing how ancient religious narratives shaped our own classical and modern literature and philosophy. That said, the primary text surrounding the Egyptian mythos is some of the most esoteric and baffling texts that you can look into. In preparation for this video, I attempted to read an English translation of the ancient Egyptian pyramid texts by James Allen, which is actually a translation of some of the oldest writing known to man. The ancient Egyptian pyramid text details the funerary rites of the dead and how the priest can guide the deceased through the underworld and its various trials and dangers. That said, I was confronted with a ritualistic script with ancient symbols, gods, and magical procedures that I was totally incapable of deciphering. So, before I went any further, I decided that I should probably be initiated properly. And this is where the book by Harris comes in. Egyptian mythology, the guide to the gods and goddesses and traditions, are those who wish to take a deep dive into the primary texts themselves, but want to do so with a stepping stone first. I strongly urge those who wish to read Allen's account of the ancient pyramid texts, which are dated to around 2500 BC, or the coffin texts, or the Egyptian Book of the Dead, accurately known as the Book of Going Forth by Day, to pick up the book by Harris first. This book is fair as a standalone. However, if you are interested in ancient Egypt, I recommend that you read some of the primary sources along with this. Harris details a jaw-dropping account of the Egyptian creation myth, beginning again with the pre-existence of the primordial waters that were shaped by the first god Autumn, later known as Atum-Ra. As Ra, the sun god, had enough cultural presence to be identified with the creator deity, here we see an immense similarity with the Sumerian myths, where the creator of their mythos had to manipulate this primordial water to create and form everything. One may even say that the Greek philosophers Thales and Parmenides, and also Plato, was influenced by this concept. The perfect mind, the nous, the demiurge, shaped everything from a primordial watery substance. Autumn, through an act of self-pleasure, or spitting, depending on the translation, birthed 9 of the primary gods of the pantheon. Some of these gods were personification of the natural forces of nature, such as Shu and Geb, which are known as the gods of air and earth, respectively, whereas others were more personal. Characters such as Set, the god of chaos and foreigners, were demonized later in history and served as the villain of the main conflict with Osiris and Horus. You also have Osiris himself, who is the god of the dead, agriculture, and resurrection, who was murdered by Seth and was avenged by his son Horus. And who could forget Thoth, the ibis-headed god of wisdom, writing, and magic? Thoth, through cultural merging with the Greek god Hermes, changed into a more human character in the form of Hermes Trismegistus. The main drama between the gods concerns the murder of Osiris by his own brother Seth. Before Seth dies, he impregnates his wife. Before the death of Osiris, he impregnates his own wife Isis with his own removed phallus, and this leads to the birth of the god of the sky, Horus. The Egyptian pharaoh was often identified with Horus, and much like the Babylonian god Marduk, was a god that legitimized a king's rule and was declared sovereign after the defeat of his enemy Seth. In my relatively large scope of research, this tale is perhaps the most cohesive narrative that tells us the characteristics and actions of the gods. In addition to the myths providing a religious justification for monarchical rule, the ancient Egyptian religion provided the practitioner with a way to escape death. The Book of Coming Forth by Day, the ancient Egyptian, the Book of Coming Forth by Day, also known as the Egyptian Book of the Dead, and the ancient Egyptian pyramid texts concern themselves with magical rituals that are meant to aid the dead in their journey through the underworld. Focusing specifically on the pyramid texts dating to around 2500 BC, we see the rites of one who has recently died. The priest magician, through these rites, unites the deceased personality, his Ba, with his life force, the Ka, to become a transfigured disembodied spirit. Through the offerings of alcohol and agricultural products, they are guided through the Duat, the realm of the dead, ending finally with final judgment, divine reward or punishment. The person's soul is weighed against a feather of divine order. If the heart weighs heavier than the feather, they are determined to have lived a life of sin and disorder, and are condemned and consumed by the goddess Amit. If they lived a just life, their hearts are deemed to be lighter than naught, this divine order, and they are saved and dwell peacefully with the gods. As we have established, the Egyptian mythological corpus is significant because of its impact on the Greek and Roman pagan world. I mentioned how Thoth merged with Hermes to become the legendary Hermes Trismegistus. Further, you can also see that the Romans adopted the goddess Isis in a popular widespread cult. And the authors even find similarities with the dying and rising god motif with the Christian tradition. On the other hand, Harris will be the first to call out comparisons of Jesus and Osiris as being overplayed and far-fetched, although they do share a final judgment and a divine reward or punishment based on behavior. Before the Christian genealogy of good and evil, the Egyptians set out their morals as one that promoted order over chaos. And there is also a religious exchange with the Sumerians as well, with their creation myths being so similar, the primordial waters being shaped by the Creator, and the idea of the dying and rising god, connected with Inanna Ishtar, who has a similar dying and rising motif in her story. Even further, the myth of the creator god fashioning a world out of this first watery substance likely influenced the philosopher Thales, who mentioned that water was a primary substance. Further, you can also see influence with Parmenides, who conceived the divine mind fashioning the world out of this sludge. Plato's benevolent craftsman, the demiurge, works in a fashion in which a perfect god works with an imperfect matter to create. And this is a pathetic substitute with what we see in the world of forms. All in all, this text by Harris is an easy, accessible, and fascinating read. It is essential for a scholarly understanding of some of the primary works, such as the ancient Egyptian pyramid texts, and also, the Book of Coming Forth by Day, or any other primary work from the Egyptian corpus. However, I think that this book could be and should be supplemented with lectures, presentations, and for a brave, even an exploration of the text mentioned earlier, the primary sources mentioned earlier. Seriously, get yourself a copy of the ancient Egyptian pyramid text if you feel brave enough. I believe that you can get the former online from the publisher, if I'm not mistaken. Whatever the case may be, I think that you'll never fully appreciate the gods and myths unless taken in their appropriate context with the primary sources. And I found this text, Egyptian mythology, a guide to the gods and goddesses and traditions of ancient Egypt, to be a very good stepping stone, and for that I give it a high recommendation.